Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Horizon Forbidden West. I play on the PS5, it's also available on the PS4. So let's start with the story. Once again, you play as Aloy in this post-apocalyptic Earth, and it starts out with a montage that she's been traveling around. She found out that, well, she didn't solve all the problems in the last game. Despite victory, she discovers that, well, there's now a blight upon the land. It's poisoning the crops, it's poisoning all the plants, it's poisoning the water, and, well, the machines are still out there killing. So she realizes she has to travel west to try and basically find a cure for this problem. Some of her old friends join her, as well as she makes new friends along the way, and I gotta say, overall, I really enjoyed the story, except the ending. I'm not gonna say the ending was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I did like the ending of the first game more. This one is very clearly, they're like, hey, franchise time! So for me, that just kind of takes away from the gravity of the story and all the things that went on in the story of Forbidden West. But let's get on to the audio, and the first thing is, all the voiceover work in this game is fantastic. It's really well done. I think all of the actors do a great job bringing their characters to life. As for the music, I love the music in this game. I think it's fantastic. I think it works perfectly with the world, with the situations, when there's action, when there's downtime, just all of it. It comes together phenomenally. And then you have the sound effects, which the sound effects are awesome. At times, it's kind of crazy how good they are. When you're out in the world, just all the different sounds of nature, whether you're in the forest, the desert, wherever, it's really well done. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is an open world, third-person RPG, essentially. Like most open world games, you have your main quests and you have all the side quests and all the other side objectives, which they do a good job listing for you in the menu so you can figure out kind of what you're doing. As for everything else, it very much does follow what was set out in the first game. They did add some new elements. And I mean that quite literally in the combat, because they've gone beyond fire, electricity, ice, and stuff. There's acid, and there's, plasma is another one that they've added as well, and water. But they've also given you new weapons as well as new items you use for traversal and exploration. And I gotta say, I think they did a good job with that. It is one of those games where it can be overwhelming. There is so very much to do in this game, but at the same time, if you want to, you can, for the most part, ignore all the side stuff and really focus on the main objective. I like the variety in the combat, how you can take similar approaches to things, but you can also really mix it up with each enemy and take them on in different ways. I just think overall, at its core, it's got some really solid gameplay mechanics that they started to hammer out, although there are some weaknesses. I'm going to get into those a bit later. Let's get into the controls, and the first thing I'm going to say is I really like the controls for the most part. I don't necessarily love the weapon wheel. There are definitely times where I was trying to select a certain thing, but I wasn't quite on it and it selected the wrong weapon. So when that happened, that is a bit frustrating. I don't necessarily love that for obvious reasons. But overall, I think the controls work well. I think your movement is good, except for, again, something I'm going to get into a little later. There is one issue. And almost last but not least is the graphics and visuals. I think this is one of the most beautiful games I have probably ever played. It's just really well done. No, I'm not going to stop right there. The world they have built is amazing. I really think all the different design elements are just fantastic. From a visual standpoint, what they do is just really impressive. I love the art style that they bring to this game, the way all the different tribes you meet have these different designs, how you can tell certain people are similar because of the way they wear their clothes, the way they dress. But then even going beyond that, like literally the biomes you visit are so lush and so beautiful, and there's so much detail in them. It's just amazing. But then again, like all the different animals you see throughout the world, the lizards, the birds, just all of them, the fact that they're in there is impressive. The thing that really impressed me the most visually was the people, the faces, the motion capture of the conversations. It was just amazing seeing that. It was so lifelike. It was just really impressive, and it helped immerse you, seeing all the different facial expressions, the minutia of the expressions. To say that it was amazing is an understatement. It's such a beautiful game. but I do have some visual complaints, and I'm going to get into those in a moment. Because I also want to comment on the fact that it is such a bright and beautiful world, and I think the enemy designs are amazing, and I think they complement the story. They go very well with the story if you're paying attention to some of the things they're talking about. To put it simply, it is a beautiful, beautiful game. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to throw in a glitches and just issues category at the end here. As of recording this, they have released a patch that fixed none of the glitches I had issues with, fixed all sorts of issues that I never experienced. Like, for example, one of the times I was in combat for a story-driven portion, all of the human enemies, invisible, couldn't see them. Could hit them, could not see them to shoot them with arrows, so it made that incredibly difficult. I died, had to restart it. Fortunately, they came back, but they were invisible for a long-ass time. It made it really unneededly difficult. Also in the combat, though, there were times where not only the enemies would kind of warp to locations, but I would warp to locations. I would warp to being hanging on a rock. I would warp to where the enemy is. It was weird and jarring, and it made the combat difficult. Specifically, that happened during melee combat sections or when I was rolling to avoid things. But then there were the kind of graphical / world issues I had. Like, I love Aloy's hair and how it's all flowy and shit, but it gets weird at times. There are definitely scenes where her hair does some weird shit and it gets a little distracting. And it's unfortunate because, again, the facial stuff is so well done, but when you see the hair like flipping around in really weird ways, that gets distracting. There was another time where I had to go complete an objective and all I had to do was walk on this like little metal door thing, and I kept sinking through it. Had to reload the checkpoint, which took me back a couple of spots, and redo it, and it worked the second time, but again, it happened and it was a pain in the ass. But I think overall the most frustrating thing I ran into in this game was dealing with the mounts and its like auto drive system. They didn't fix the issue from the first game of it doesn't follow the fucking route that is mapped out on the map. It will turn left when you need to go right and vice versa, and it will do all sorts of weird shit. Sometimes it will randomly follow that route, other times it will not, and that's very frustrating. It's something they absolutely should have fixed from the first game. If you can pull up the map and see a route, why can't your mount follow that route? But the worst part about it, and this happened to both my mount and my character, there are times where it will just randomly stop. Like it's gotten hung up on some sort of invisible geometry, and sometimes not always invisible geometry. When you're riding on the mount, it's such a beautiful world, but there's these rocks and stuff on the path, and they will stop your mount. Your mount won't go around them, and that's where the steering issue is as well, because they just don't work well together. I don't know if it's a steering issue, a design issue, a gameplay issue, but it's like they designed these routes and then put like rocks in the way that will stop your mount, and it gets very frustrating traveling through the world when this happens. But sometimes there's nothing in the way and your mount will just come to a complete stop. And this happened to me and my character, Aloy, during combat. I don't know what it is, I don't know why it's there, but it happened enough times that there's no way this didn't happen in testing, so I don't know why it's in the final product. And while none of these glitches and issues really ruined the game for me, they do chip away at the overall quality. Also though, there is no New Game Plus. That is also a complaint. There should be a New Game Plus in any game that has a progress system. So to wrap this up, I'm gonna say I've seen the reviews, 9.5, 9, all that shit. It absolutely doesn't earn that in its current state. I could easily see this game being of that quality at some point, but there's plenty of patching to do to remove all these little issues that I experienced, let alone the ones they've already had to patch that I didn't run into. That being said, I actually really enjoyed the game. I'm glad to have played through it. I do think it is a great title at the end of the day, but I can still comfortably recommend this. No addendums. I think it's fully worth buying. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, have you played the first Horizon? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.